Iowa basketball player Owen Freeman is shutting it down for the season. The end of an era looks that way today. Locked on Hawkeyes.
You are Locked On Hawkeyes, your daily podcast on the Iowa Hawkeyes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, welcome in. I'm Trent Condon, and this is the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We're available wherever you find podcasts. You can also watch us on YouTube. Hit subscribe while you're there. Helps us get in front of more Hawkeye fans. Today's episode of Locked On Hawkeyes is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Well, here we are on a Tuesday after the weekend that was in Iowa athletics. A lot of reaction to Sunday, what we saw at Carver-Hawkeye Arena as Caitlin Clark was honored, the big upset victory, the excitement of that. Plenty on wrestling, but in the background of all this has been the men's basketball program, and a men's basketball program that has not played since a week ago Monday, has been off now 8 days as we sit here on Tuesday, and because of that, they've been back and talked about very little until yesterday. So we got Scott Dochterman coming up today. We'll talk with Doc a little bit about his thoughts on Owen Freeman shutting it down. I'll also get his perspective as he was at Carver-Hawkeye Arena on Sunday and his thoughts on the women's basketball team upset and the retiring of Caitlin Clark. We'll talk about that with Scott Dochterman coming up. And of course, get ready for the game tonight against Purdue. But before we get to the game, we have to talk about Owen Freeman. And if this is yet another nail in the coffin of Fran McCaffrey in the end of his tenure. A finger injury that many people speculate should not keep him out for the season. That is something that he would be able to play with. Yes, guys are banged up across the country, but this is the type of injury that many players could play through. That's the speculation. Now, Fran McCaffrey, in his press conference yesterday, did not make it sound that way. That was something that needed to happen. He said the timing was unfortunate, and you do agree with that part of it. But here we are. And I pose this very simply. You know, if Iowa would have won a couple more games, if the Hawkeyes were sitting right now at 15-6, and they were, instead of 4-6 in the conference, 6-4, looking to be an NCAA tournament team, do we believe that Owen Freeman will be shutting it down? I don't. I don't believe that is the case. Another interesting angle is before the announcement came down, and this has been speculated, it started a Thursday, there were plenty of rumblings and rumors that were out there. But going back to that time and then looking Sunday night, and you see Owen Freeman suddenly in his Instagram profile has an agent listed in there. What does that usually mean in college athletics? That means he's going to the transfer portal. Taking a step further, Charlie Donovan, a online persona in college basketball circles. If he believes a guy is entering the transfer portal, and he says as much in his Discord and his newsletter, it's going to happen more times than not. Well, more times than not isn't even fair. I mean, it's like a 98% hit rate. That's a guy that has been talked about, along with Brock Harding from Charlie Donovan. They play on the name Billy Donovan, but a guy that is very well connected and both recruiting and just college basketball circles as a whole. So there's another step in the process. So what does it all mean? What was it, the Austin Powers? What does it mean, Basil? What does it all mean? Well, it goes back to the speculation we've been talking about for weeks now, that this thing's over, that the Fran McCaffrey era is over. That would be the most realistic step. And as we look through, and what has been as confounding of a year of Iowa basketball that I can remember. Look, there's years that are good. There's years that are bad. There are years you're frustrated. There's things you can point at, the reason for it. There's no way that you can explain this season, the uptick in recruiting, getting another 4-star a couple of weeks ago, getting a guy from Miami that was a 4-star and a top 150 player that played very little at Miami as a mid-year transfer, something that Fran McCaffrey never done before. We don't see these things. So you got this uptick in recruiting while the fan base is checked out. A team that looks as uninterested as anything. Fran McCaffrey, his sideline demeanor has gone completely in the opposite direction. You have all these things happening all at the same time. It is absolutely befuddling. And here we are. Does Fran McCaffrey know that this is the end? Have made her choice? Are they just playing out the string? And now Owen Freeman is going to be the first to get to the front of the line and say, I'm out. That's where the speculation is. That's why we continue down this path. It is absolutely one of the more ridiculous seasons of Iowa basketball that I can remember. And they still have to play. They still have remaining games. And this is what we've talked about a ton. The back half of this schedule, this is where it's tough. This is where it got difficult. And he's, even as Iowa got off to a decent start, and after the wins against Nebraska and Indiana, said you got to keep going. You got to keep going because it's going to get more difficult. What do? They lose 4 out of 5. And now here we are. And now this team is currently in the Big Ten tournament. But again, remember, the bottom 3 teams in the Big Ten will not qualify for the Big Ten tournament. Iowa lose a tiebreaker against Minnesota. Iowa gets another game against Northwestern. Iowa gets Washington. Iowa has the tiebreaker against Penn State. They'll get Rutgers. That'll be on the road. They'll get Nebraska one more time. That'll be on the road. Got the tiebreaker against Indiana. I guess that's a good thing. But if you're looking at the bottom teams, you're looking at the teams that you're battling with at this point in time, the Rutgers, the Penn States, the Northwesterns, Minnesota, Washington, still work needs to be done just to qualify for the Big Ten tournament. And if you would have told me before this season that this would be a conversation we'd be happening in February, I would have called you crazy. I thought this team was going to be a bubble team. I thought they were going to be on the right side of the bubble after we saw them a couple games in. And blame me, shame on me, for taking a look at a couple of those tomato cans and getting excited this team is going to be better defensively. What is going to be, if this turns out to be the end, what is going to be our memories of the Fran McCaffrey era? And after you get a little bit of distance, there will be the good things will start to come back. But the frustrations that are there, it's going to be a big, big conversation piece. Crazy. Now they take on Purdue tonight. Iowa at FanDuel is a 7.5-point underdog. You look at the analytics that also have baked in, of course, Owen Freeman being there. They're a 6-point dog at Ken Pomeroy. So Owen Freeman averages 16.7 points per game, 6.7 rebounds, a little better in assists, leads the team in block shots. What do? Is it just as simple they're going to put Laje Dembele in there now? So Dembele comes into the game at the center position where he's been the backup. You go that route? Is it Riley Mulvey time? Again, how we got to this point. Riley Mulvey in the starting lineup? Well, crazier things have happened. And get the kid the shot now. At least he tries. At least he works hard. That's where we are for guys that actually work hard. D1 basketball players that not only are scholarship players, but now we're also getting paid. And we're worrying about guys playing hard. What a disaster. What a frustrating year. A team that can't rebound, they can't play defense, loses one of their better defenders, their only rim protector. Oh, and about the only guy that can actually rebound on the team. He's not great at it himself, but at least he gets there. Oh boy. And Purdue and Wisconsin, 2 teams that have embarrassed you for years and years and years. Those are your next 2. Good luck. Let's talk with Scott Dochterman. He was at Carver-Hawkeye Arena over the weekend. His perspective on what we saw, not just on the hardwood and the upset win against USC for the women's basketball program, but thoughts on Caitlin Clark. We'll talk about that, plus a little bit men's basketball with Scott Dochterman of The Athletic as we continue. This is Locked On Hawkeyes. Today's episode of the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast is brought to you by Gametime. Looking for tickets for your next big event? Whether it's a concert, comedy show, or sports game, find the right ticket at the right price. It can be a headache looking for those right tickets. But with Gametime Picks, it's never been easier. Let me tell you how it works. With Gametime Picks, the app does all the hard work for you. It curates the best deals so you don't have to waste time searching through endless ticket listings. I've been using Gametime Picks for a while now. Here's why I love it. The curated deals make it super simple to find great tickets at a great price, No more sifting through thousands of options. I recently grabbed a super deal for a prime seat. I couldn't believe the value, an absolute steal. The seat view feature is an absolute game changer. Before I even hit buy, I can see exactly what my seat will look like inside the venue, and it's so reassuring. The best part, you're covered with Gametime's lowest price guarantee. If you find a better deal somewhere else, they'll refund 110% of the difference. Plus, your tickets are guaranteed to be delivered on time with an easy cancellation options if something else comes up. Ready to take your next event, make it even better? Download the Gametime app, create an account, and make sure you use the code It's Locked On College for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, that's code Locked On College for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed.
Scott Dochterman was at Carver yesterday, sold out, watching the Hawks take care of business against USC as a underdog in that game in front of a whole bunch of potential recruits and players that are already committed playing for Iowa. And, oh, by the way, Caitlin Clark was there and her family as well, as the number got hoisted to the rafters. Doc, Trent, and Ken, thanks for coming on. Read your piece at The Athletic. Very well done, as always. Just kind of describe the day. You've certainly spent multitudes of days in that building, not entire days, but you get my point, covering games. This one, for a lot of people, will be one of those ones that they remember at Carver-Hawkeye. Pretty special day yesterday, Doc.
It sure was. I mean, I was there for about 10 hours, so I was there. They turned out the lights on me and everything, but it was, it's one that probably stacks up there as far as atmosphere and energy. I was there when Megan Gustafson's jersey was retired, and that was a wonderful moment for her. But this is different. I mean, you are talking about a generational talent, one of the most recognizable people in the world now.
Yep.
And to have her live, there with the surroundings, with the people in attendance, and that made it a day unto itself. Then you throw on the game against the top 5 team with potentially the next great scorer in the college basketball, and then for Iowa to pull the upset, you have a magical moment that will go down. I compared it to 2016 Iowa-Michigan football when Michigan was number 2, and you had Iowa felt so overmatched in that game, yet they pulled out an incredible victory. And I think this is kind of the same type of scenario with the game, and then, of course, the surroundings.
Great game. And then we culminate with Caitlin Clark. And, you do it with writing and also conversing. We do it with the audio side of things. It is so difficult to come up with something new. The superlatives that we've gone on and on and on, change the game, change the sport, change sport like we haven't seen for women, just on and on and on. Doc, do you have anything new for us, a different angle to take? Because that's kind of where we get. In a way, it's almost unfair to Caitlin Clark because we can't come up with something new.
Right. She's the most dynamic sports figure in the world right now. I mean, she was, Time Magazine put her on the cover as Athlete of the Year. And that's where she's judged, because she's as recognizable. I said it last year that who's a more recognizable name and face, Caitlin Clark or Jaden Daniels, after he won the Heisman.
Yeah,
and it's Caitlin Clark.
Yeah.
And even today, if he's the Rookie of the Year, he's going to, he's a tremendous player. She's more recognizable. She's more recognizable around the world. In fact, I asked her in our in the press conference, just when you look at, she's probably been overly scrutinized, more so than anybody, save for political candidates and her Chiefs BFF, Taylor Swift.
Yeah.
Nobody's been more scrutinized than her, and yet here she is. But I think one thing that I thought from yesterday, watching the game, that is kind of her legacy is what we saw unfold. And that is, you had a full, lively arena where the decibels got up to 118, which is just unbelievable. You saw a court storm for a women's basketball game. You saw the other team that benefits from this, and Juju Watkins, who's now her replacement as far as State Farm commercials. but they were there to honor her legacy as well. And the most classy thing I've ever seen from an opposing team, they stayed through that ceremony and watched, and they cheered. And that to me tells you everything. And I think it's I said Caitlin Clark showed us that basketball could be both warm and cool. That it is the coolest thing to do in Iowa City right now. And yet you could still be warm and friendly and competitive. And I think that's what her legacy says to me, at least in what I saw yesterday.
Yeah, no doubt about it. And Lucy Olson, who came to, not to replace Caitlin Clark, no one ever will, but to pick up some of that scoring. That probably was her best day in an Iowa uniform, Doc, on a stage where the lights were as brightest as they've been on this edition of the women's basketball program. What a day for Lucy Olson to have the day that she did.
No question. She needed that in the worst way. Iowa needed that from her in the worst way. And because she's been very inconsistent at times, it looked like this level of basketball is too big for her, and yet to produce in the and on a day where Iowa needed to play well, not only to win but just to compete in front of all those eyes on television and in the arena. You wanted to put out a good effort and a good product, even if you lost. And for her to battle the way she did in the second half, and to score like she did, the three top scorers from last season were all in the same arena yesterday.
That's wild,
and she was number 3.
Yeah,
and she outplayed the other one.
Yeah.
And I thought, hopefully for her, that gives her the confidence she can do that consistently, and for Iowa, that they can rely on her to do that consistently. If that's the case, then this season's going to have, a really good result at the end of it.
And the importance of building on what they've done the last few years and what they've done the last 6-7 years when you kind of go big picture, but you want to get to that final destination, the recruits that were in town. I went back and I looked at when UConn broke through under Oriema. It was a slow build. They made a couple of tournaments before Rebecca Lobo got there. By the end, they won a national championship, but then they built upon that. It took a couple more years to do that. That's what's next now for Iowa women's basketball, right? It's taking that great environment and now getting these players and make this sustainable. It was a great run, and they've had a tremendous run, but you want to be in that conversation. You want to become a blue blood. You need to keep it going in and go to the women's NIT right after Caitlin graduates. Boy, that would hurt the momentum.
It would stall it, but I don't think it would hurt it as much as people think. Now, I think they still have a pretty good chance to make the tournament, NCAA tournament. But at what I think this does yesterday, it provides every inspiration for all of those recruits who are there, who are looking at Iowa specifically, which is you take in this atmosphere. It's incredible. It's unlike any other one that we've seen in the country, and it's been like this repeatedly. And then you look on the floor. This team is capable of winning big games against great players. And then finally, you look at on the floor, and if you're one of those really elite level recruits, you think, I could go out there and play. I can win a job there. And so you have the opportunity to play right away in an arena like this that's unique to anywhere in college basketball, and to be beloved the way you are. And you have a court storm. I mean, it sets up perfectly for Iowa in that regard. And I mean, yes, you want to make the tournament, not the WNIT, and I get that, but I don't think it would just be a crushing blow for the program based on that win yesterday. I think that really elevates it no matter what happens.
We've got a lot of ground to cover with you, Doc. I want to get to wrestling and wrestling Twitter. As you saw firsthand, the people take it seriously. They're wrestling. They're a passionate group, no doubt about it. The vitriol was flying after Friday, to say the very least. And then Owen Freeman. So we want to get there with you as well. But just one more on yesterday's game for me. You know who else needed that win yesterday? Jen Jensen, I think, probably needed that win yesterday, because maybe the pressure was starting to fall on her lap a little bit, Doc. How about that?
Sure. And she felt the pressure. She admitted that now I can sleep a little bit better at night. When you lose a lot of close games and you're a coach, you try to replay the game over and over again, what you could have done differently. And part of that is the players on the floor just not playing consistently, but then you have to try to make the chessboard move in a way that works. And when you're missing a layup at the gun, to go to overtime, or you're missing a 3-pointer that could tie it. Just all those things where you're like, we're right there, but we can't get over the top. This is your first quad one win of the season. You're now 1-5 in quad one games, but Iowa's net is 31. But I think for her, it's one of those where, okay, you push through, you got this win. There are a couple of more, I think this week, were games that I kind of circled as more important. They're on the road at Minnesota and Nebraska because they're in their neighborhood. These are, comparable teams. Either one can win, either one can lose on a given night. And I think this shows you that, what this does is it inspires Jan to think, okay, I've got things under control, and the players, okay, we can play this consistently. And if we can beat this team, we can beat that team. And so I think that kind of confidence will be helpful for everybody, going over the last month of the season.
Let's stay on the hardwood, go over to the men's side. The announcement today, Owen Freeman is shutting it down for the season. Press release came, was a quote from Fran McCaffrey in there. Been a lot of rumblings here lately, but boy, it just, it's a different kind of look and something a week away. This is not, I think, what a lot of people hope for. You needed a strong push, and now that strong push looks to be, it was already unlikely, even more unlikely now without Owen Freeman for the rest of the year.
Yeah, I think everybody wants, you want to keep that hope out there that if we play well, we can do X. And that's where you reach this point in the season. And Iowa's 4-6 in the Big Ten, but with opportunity. You're playing teams at home. You feel like if you play well at home, you have a chance, and maybe you win, or maybe you split. And then you go on the road and you're playing teams, by and large, the rest of the way where you're not necessarily always the underdog, but you're playing teams that are, you feel like if you play well, you should compete with. And then unfortunately, losing somebody like Freeman, who's 10th in the Big Ten in scoring and 3rd in blocks, he is the best player on that team. And you're already by far the worst rebounding team in the Big Ten. It's not even close. The rebounding margin, they're 18th at minus 5.43. 17th is Minnesota at minus barely over 1. So you are the worst team, and you lost your worst rebounder. Oh my gosh, and then that spills into everything, because now you're not going to get second chance opportunities. You're going to get, they're going to get them instead. And then you're playing a Purdue, which isn't quite the same bashing Purdue team that they used to be, but they're still pretty good in that area, and in Wisconsin. And, they're Iowa's bad, defending the 3, and now they're, and especially at field goal defense. So this just spills over in so many areas. It's hard to now have hope the rest of the way. 10 games, looking big picture, 1 or 2. I mean, that's I'm trying to be realistic, 1 or 2 wins on there. I mean, you're going to, like their home schedule, the teams are 32-21, and on the road it's 25-31. And if you're a good team, that's what you want. But right now, I don't even know if that's what you're going to Nebraska and Northwestern, and, teams that you feel, in Rutgers, teams you feel like, well, we should be equal to, even without an Owen Freeman, but you're on the road, and that makes it more difficult.
Yeah, Barnheiser lost for Northwestern for the year I saw. And I thought that Nebraska-Iowa game at the end of the year could have some implications. It's hard to find reason for optimism. So who gets those minutes? I mean, Riley Mulvey, come on down. I mean, where are we at?
Yeah, I think it's going to be all hands on deck, and it's going to have to be him. I mean, do they go small? There's, instead of trying to cover up their weaknesses, do they just say, what, our weaknesses are weaknesses? We're just going to, try to push the ball as fast as we can and do what we can do best. And that's kind of, I think you're going to have to push some of those buttons. But again, you're playing teams like Purdue and Wisconsin. And then you're going to Maryland, and you got Oregon at home, for the, NCAA tournament teams. So this is going to be a tough task, no question.
Let's get into the wrestling, the frustration. Just take us in a little bit. You like to, I don't know if you like to, you just seem to get in those Twitter spats from time to time. And I'll tell you, as an outsider, I get a big chuckle out of it, Doc. I love how you go back at people there. You've been doing it for a long time. Do you get a smile every once in a while, or is it more frustration than anything on Twitter?
More frustration, because I don't try to like poke the bear, but somehow it just turns back on me. And this was a situation where I got it from both sides, and I'm not a wrestling expert. I do appreciate the sport clearly, but the other day I mentioned just kind of how they lost these close matches, and this is what was going to make things difficult. And everybody wants Tom Brands fired, or a lot of people did, and I'm like, well, that's the same as everything with Iowa. I mean, they lose, it's fire everybody, and then somebody came back, and I'm like, so reading from your timeline, you want Kirk fired, you want Fran fired, you want Brands fired. You're not high on Jan. I said, what's next? You're going to pick Rick Heller he's got to get fired too, and then I had a wrestling fan, tell me I don't know anything about the sports, so don't comment about it. And that was after I said I'm not going to. I don't know what to say about Tom Brands, because I'm not an expert to say if he's the right or wrong guy here. Don't ask me that question, and it just doesn't matter. I think people were angry and they wanted to spout off, and I was there and I took all the arrows.
Scott Dochterman from The Athletic. Doc, thank you. Appreciate it as always. We'll talk to you in a week time. Thank you, Scott.
Have a good one, guys.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Scott Dochterman is we check in on Iowa.
Back with you one final time on the Locked On Hawkeyes podcast. Trent Condon with you, and thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. As we get ready for tonight in the matchup against Purdue, Iowa, what are they going to figure out? I think very simply, it is the time to see what you can get out of Seydou Traore. I think that is an absolute must in this one, because you have to see. You have to see if he's going to be a guy that at minimum is a rotational piece, and if there's more to him. That's what you're doing at this point in time. Now, where does Bryce Sanford fit in this squad? And what is he going to be going forward? I think at times earlier this season, you saw some good things out of him, and now it almost feels like that role's been replaced. I mean, do you go back to the well? What do you do inside? This team is a terrible rebounding team, a terrible defensive team. What do you do against a Purdue team that is going to be able to beat you in a myriad of different ways, but what they're built on year after year is what they do on the defensive end of the floor. And this team is not nearly as good defensively as they normally are, but they're an elite level offensive team. How do you get stops? Is it going with just one traditional point guard out there? Is this the game where you say, Drew Thelwell, you are the guy. We're going to start with you. Or move him to the bench and add a little scoring punch off the bench. Just so many different ways that Fran McCaffrey can go in this one. Interested to see how it plays out. I would anticipate it's going to be pretty boring. It'll be Dembele in there at the center position, and they'll go from there. But I'd like to see a shakeup. This team needs it. They're lost. They have the appearance of a team that has given up. And now your most decorated player, Owen Freeman, is hanging it up and has his Ancients profile and his Instagram profile. That's not great. Not a great look. The speculation will grow. We will be back with you after the conclusion of this one. When it goes final, we'll be hopping on the horn and talking to you with a Rapid Reaction podcast. It's likely not going to go well. I will tell you I'm going to be on the Boilermakers tonight, and I hope I am dead wrong. But yes, I am very confident about laying the points in this one. Maybe they get off the mat. Could be a dead cat bounce. We'll see. I'll be rooting for the Hawkeyes, but not going to be betting on them. We'll be back with you after the conclusion of this one. Busy week. We got football talk. More recruiting news for the Iowa football team. Class of 2025 has added another commitment. We will get into that a little bit later in the week. The class of 2026 is filling up on the offensive line. So some football talk coming up later this week. We got a little more wrestling to get into. And of course, what's happening on the hardwood, both men's and women. And we got you covered. Your team every day. That's what we do on the Locked On Network. And we got you covered. Your favorite teams, NBA, MLB, NFL, and of course the NHL, along with what we do. Locked On Big Ten, Locked On Fantasy Sports, you name it, we got you covered here, and I got you on the Hawkeye side of things. Thanks for making Locked On Hawkeyes your first listen every day. We'll talk to you again tomorrow. Until then, go Hawks.